We do have a quorum now.
Thanks, Isabel. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the supplemental meeting of the Finance and Revenue Committee. I just want to thank all of you committee members and staff in Echo Northwest for rescheduling this meeting actually to be earlier so that we can get our final responses into the board in time for the board meeting next week. So thank you so much for that. We'll start with roll call.
Yes. Cheryl Ramirez.
Here.
Thank you. Chunwei Chi looks like it's not here. Mary Lou Henrich.
Here.
Thank you. Richard Gibson.
Here.
Thank you. Jeff Goodman. I do not see Jeff. John Santa.
Here.
Thank you. Bethany Stairs. I don't see Bethany. And Charlie Swanson.
Here.
Thank you. That's everyone.
Thanks, Isabel. We're going to quickly review the agenda and then I'm going to gladly hand it off to Echo Northwest, I believe. Could you go to the agenda? Okay, so you all probably, I hope, have seen the memo, and I know some of you have provided comments. I have too, to Echo Northwest and to our staff. And we're going to just talk about those revisions and how we finalize the memo and again, the response to the board. What we'd like to really get to are these three specific topics where we feel like we'll need a vote on the simplified contribution model, employer payroll tax credit, Medicare premium credit, and a top marginal rate. We'll, of course, dig into those topics. So that's really what we want to get done today, is just get to a final decision consensus on these three topics and any other critical feedback for the memo and the overall response to the board. And with that, I think I'm either handing it over to Mimi or to Echo Northwest. I'm not sure.
I think Mimi has got it quick.
All right.
Yeah.
Mimi, the floor is
Correct me if I'm wrong, Mimi.
Nope.
Okay.
I think we're going to take up all the time. If something comes up about some of the Medicare specifics, I'll hop in, but I think it will be better to spend the whole time with this and then we can add to that.
Sounds great. That's all I
Great.
watched now.
Great. All right, Isabel, I'm going to replace your share with mine. All right. Hello, everyone, and good to see you on Thursday afternoon. And before I get started, I do want to say I think everybody in the committee and should give a big thank you to both Charlie and Richard, who have spent more time than probably they bargained for. And what we're presenting today really reflects a lot of their heavy lifting. We've been trying to just package it up. And so Charlie, Richard, as I kind of walk through, if you want to interrupt me or add something on, I'll provide a little sort of spots for you to chime in. But big thanks to start. Okay, so today's meeting here, I think, is we're trying. Here we go. Are we trying to provide some feedback to the governing board based on their feedback? And I think a lot of it well taken. I think when we looked at that, it kind of fit into kind of two big buckets. The first bucket was really we just need to do a better job explaining some of this to the layperson and provide additional context. And those were all well taken points. The second thing I think, and the one that sort of prioritizes your sort of deliberation, is to reflect on some feedback with respect to the structure of the original straw proposal. And so today's piece reflects kind of the conversation we had a couple weeks ago, and then a bunch of work that Charlie and Richard had done to sort of provide some context and some initial thinking here for folks. So it's probably worth sort of then positing here to say, what did we propose in that straw proposal? There was a employer payroll tax meant to sort of replace the ESI payments levied on employers payers based on payroll above some defined thresholds. And I think there's still some conversation on those what those thresholds should be, but I think for the time being, that's more of a secondary technical question we can talk about later, not today. But and then the main revenue then, since the EPT was offered as a credit, would be raised through a healthcare personal income tax, as well as a per person premium administered through the personal income tax process. And then the big sort of, I would say, another big feature of that was a soft cap. So this is basically controls for the level and nature of the tax on higher income individuals with respect to basically comparison to their sort of existing healthcare contributions. Go ahead, Charlie.
So I'm not sure if this is a slide you're going to present to the board or not, but
Hello
the
there.
second,
Oh, oh, might want to pause. Well, there we go.
the second item on there, it's not really a flat tax rate. I mean, it is a flat tax rate above a threshold, which
Nope.
means it's not at all a flat tax.
It's not, yeah, not a great clarification, not a flat tax, a consistent tax, but with phase-ins. So the doesn't hit everybody.
Constant rate, maybe a constant rate.
Yep. Oh,
Above an exemption based on federal poverty level guidelines. Somewhat based on that, actually.
okay. Is my computer's doing weird things. Are you guys seeing?
We're seeing both. We're not seeing the regular presentation. There we go. Now you're back to us.
Thank you. Weird. Great. Well, thanks for the clarification. That's an important distinction. So one of the things after our meeting and some of the after discussing some of the feedback from the board, Charlie, Richard, Will, and I kind of decided to say, well, how can we then think through some of the key pieces of feedback with respect to equity, structural complexity, design recommendations, and test some different ideas that would kind of give us some more insights and give this committee some basis to sort of deliberate on. And so the biggest change coming out of that that feedback was to rethink the healthcare personal income tax and premium structure, and to transition that to a more unified healthcare personal income tax that does household adjustments through a lookup table. So basically, you can look at your income, you can look at your household size, and it computes your tax. The other three questions that the board had really had to do with kind of targeted equity and fairness questions. And the first one was about the payroll tax credit that was being offered to employees on the basis of their employer payroll pay taxes. That was set at 100% original proposal. There was also a question raised in this group and others around the fairness of the income, the healthcare personal income tax, and whether it should credit those individuals that are currently paying premiums in Medicare. And then there were questions on the sort of idea and policy of the soft cap. I think specifically, I would say around two different issues, whether or not that should be offered, and also from a question of, I guess, fairness in terms of overall burdens. I think there was some feedback on both sides of this issue about how the highest earners in this tax plan should contribute. And so we've done a little work to kind of set the table there. Okay. So to preface that, so Charlie and Richard tried to put together a series of tax scenarios, or call them tax plans, that really would try to help us test different ideas so that we could hone in on these questions of structure and equity and policy as much as possible. So just so you know, we are holding some of these things consistent so that we can zone in on this question of the credits and the soft cap. So we're using pretty uniform payroll, employer payroll tax rate, so about 9.6% at the $500,000 firm threshold. We, as well as the wage phase-in, the standard deduction, and then we are using uniform rates with respect to the corporate income tax, activity tax, and then similar sort of with our other revenue sources. Go ahead, Mary Lou. And
My
Charles.
question is, were we in the previous iterations talking an 11% employer payroll tax, and now we're at 9.6? Is that correct?
Yeah, Charlie, do you want to answer that question really quickly?
Yeah, so one of the things that we decided based upon, I would say largely on public comments, but also on analyzing what the effect of various things were, is we've chosen in all of the plans we're presenting this at this point to not have a wage threshold for private employers. And so not having that wage threshold means that private employers will start paying the tax, you know, on the first dollar of payroll. Well, not really. There will only be a firm threshold, not a wage threshold. The first dollar of wages for each employee, I should say. And the reasoning that public comments said for that is essentially the Walmart issue, that, you know, it would not tax them enough. And so with that not being in there, the employer payroll tax rate can be a little bit lower. And again, the choice of the rate is combined with the corporate income tax and corporate activity tax, is so that overall employers pay almost as much in the new system as they are doing in the status quo. And again, so that lower tax rate is due to the fact that we no longer have a wage threshold.
Okay, I get that, but what is the part where it says applied above a $500,000 firm threat? I mean, these threshold things are confusing me. So,
Okay, so one of the things that people are worried about, and I think many members on this committee are worried about, is burdening small employers that currently do not cover their employee health care. And so when you look at the data that Echo Northwest provided for what firm sizes, you know, of various firm sizes, what percentage currently provide health care for their employees. And from that, I mean, at small enough firms, very few provide health care for their employees.
I got that. Okay.
And so the firm threshold is there so that those firm size have a total payroll of less than $500,000 pay nothing on taxes, and that amount is exempted from all firms. So it's a marginal tax rate above 500,000 payroll. That's what the EPT is. So it's a marginal tax rate to avoid fiscal cliffs, and the choice of the payroll size is based on that. Seems to be about a somewhat reasonable number to protect small businesses.
Okay, I get that. But what Morgan was saying something about, or you're talking about individual, you lost
Yeah,
a
so
little bit. Okay.
That's gone.
Yeah,
That doesn't
yeah,
exist anymore.
let me backtrack. I think I misspoke
Yeah.
there. So what's changed here is that threshold. So we used to have like a standard deduction, I think about 50,000 or what, 140% of the federal poverty level. That is now gone.
100% of federal poverty level, yeah. For one person.
Yep.
Yeah. That wage threshold is no longer there.
So people, okay.
So there's a wage threshold and a
uh,
firm threshold.
The employer pays on the payroll,
Yes.
even for the payrolls of those who make not very much money.
Okay.
Yeah.
I got that. Okay, great. Is
Okay.
that all you're saying?
Yeah, the firm threshold is
you.
there, the individual threshold is not.
Okay.
No, I
thank
didn't
you.
mean to misspeak there and lead us astray.
Okay, it just got me confused, but now I
No,
got it. Okay,
Thank
sounds
you, Mary
good.
Lou.
Thank you.
Good reminder that everybody's paying attention to everything I say, so I should try to be
Yes.
as correct as possible. Thank you.
Thanks.
Great. Charlie, do you want to add anything else, or were you just answering that question? Okay, great. So I'm not going to belabor these points too much here, but Richard and Charlie tried to create a series of different tax plans that really tried to answer a set of questions. And so that means every tax plan right here is leaving something similar and varying other ones so that we, as much as possible, can try to sort of, and I think in the subsequent slides and in the memo, test these very specific ideas. But it's just worth noting that anytime you sort of change the credit, right, you change how much money is being raised, and that when that has a downstream effect on what the personal income tax rate needs to be. So there's always this sort of equilibrium, but we're trying to keep it as sort of close to apples as possible to facilitate this conversation. And so there are, well, actually, they were more than F, but these are the ones I think that were constructed so that folks can see sort of what's being held similar and what's being varied, so that we can answer these questions. Charlie, Richard, anything you want to add to that? Otherwise, I'll move us along. Go ahead, Charlie.
Yeah. So the next one, G, is the one that had the soft cap, so we could explain that. So I think there was all of the other ones did not have a soft cap, but the G did, and so the one that explored that is not listed here.
Yeah, and I actually added a slide. I actually played around with the calculator a little bit yesterday and just created a little kind of, all things being equal, how different variations on the soft cap. Great. So let's get into some of the big questions. So I think the very first question here that the board wanted some feedback, and I think Charlie and Richard have a point of view on, is what should be the should we be offering 100% credit? I think is the first question on the employer payroll tax to households whose employers pay that tax, or should we be thinking about something less of that? And to what extent can we understand what maybe a potential optimal credit would be? Go ahead, Charlie.
So if we're going to try to explain this to the board, I think there's several more plots that need to be there.
Yes.
First of all, the credit is only there for employees of an employer who actually paid the employer payroll tax. And so each plot needs to have what would be paid by someone who has that same income, but either they're employed by a small employer, or they're self-employed, or their incomes come from not some other source. So for income that comes from a non-large employer, basically. Otherwise, there's not a fair comparison, I don't think. The other thing that I think needs to be there to show a reasonable comparison is to include both. I may be on a different plot, but somehow, and I have some ideas on how we could show this, but what does the employer pay, and what does, so that you can, it can be seen that the employee is only getting the credit when their employer actually pays more. And if their employer isn't paying much, they're not getting the credit. And so, so to me, that total tax rate of both employer and employee is also important. And maybe it needs to be kind of a split one where it's like, how much is your employer paying? How much is your employee paying? And what's the total? And so,
so
all
maybe
of those things need to be there.
Yeah, Charlie, maybe it'd be worth to back up then here, because I know things are moving quickly. So in your mind, when we think about offering a credit less than 100%, what are the main reasons to be doing that, and kind of why have we kind of narrowed in on the 40%?
Well, so less than 100% is because there was, I think, reasonable objections to a large firm employer with high income would pay nothing individually, because the employer payroll tax is larger than the HCPIT. And especially with the HCPIT having a federal poverty level exemption and the employer payroll tax not having that. And so that seemed unfair. So it needs to be less than 100% for that reason. And the 40% was somewhat arbitrary, and I would say that's one thing we want to continue to explore. We want to explore what makes sense, but under 100%, I think, is necessary in order to not have the large firm, high income person not paying anything. And so I think we still need to explore some other amounts of credit along the way.
And just to also make a very sort of blunt observation here is that I guess there's you still believe that we should offer it, right? The credit should not be zero. And part of the reason here we're looking at this is because of, and I think related to the question you have less than 100, but the potentially the equity and sort of percussivity impacts for workers at lower incomes.
So no, it's more related to, and I put this in my comments to the memo. I'm not sure where those are at this point, but the you would expect an employer to pay lower wages if they have to pay more elsewhere. So the employers that are having to pay more in the employer payroll tax are almost surely paying their employees lower wages than they otherwise would. We maybe not 100%, dollar for dollar exchange there, but almost for sure, those employees are getting lower wages because their employee has another expense that they need to deal with. And so to me, you absolutely need to do something about that. I mean, they're getting lower wages. They shouldn't suffer just because they have an employer, compared to somebody who doesn't have an employer and there's nobody paying anything for them. So to me, that's an absolutely necessary equity issue that doesn't have to do with low wage or high wage. It has to do with, it has to do with low wage. It has to do with lower wages because your employer has an expense related to this.
This is Mary Lou. Can I say something?
Go for it, Mary Lou.
I don't really agree with you, Charlie. Have you ever employed anybody? Have you ever been in charge of a business? Because I
have been employed by public employers, and I have been part of a union. In every negotiation, there is a trade-off between wages and healthcare benefits.
I get that.
Every single one, doesn't matter, and that's true for private employers as well.
Yeah, I get that, but I'm telling you, as a person who has actually employed people, the last thing that we looked at was this. The first thing we looked at is, what is the market paying for these people? And can we compete in that market? It really wasn't around looking at the tax part at all. It was kind of like, if we've got to pay 45,000, how are we going to have the money to do that? If we pay, can we get by with paying 35,000 to somebody, because there's a lot of other businesses like us that's what they're paying. I'm just saying, I don't know. I hear what you're saying from where you've been, because I've also been in a union before that as an employee, and I was at the bargaining table for Multnomah County on both sides. At one point in my career, I was on the management side, and the other time in my career, I was on the labor side. So I get what you're saying, but I guess I'm just saying that it isn't, I don't know that that's the number one thing that employers figure out, how they're going to pay their people. Anyway,
I mean, to me, when an employer is thinking about, maybe you didn't do that in yours, but to me, when an employer is looking at it, they look at the total benefits they're going to have to pay. And so some choose to pay more in other benefits, and some, in less in wages, and some choose this, but it's the total compensation package they're looking at in order to compete for employees. That's what an employee is going to be looking at, is a total compensation package. So to me, it has to be part of it.
Okay. I'll just keep my mouth shut for a while. Okay.
Well, I think we should continue to explore having none, but I think we should explore a variety of sizes. But
Yeah. So I would say formally, I think the response to the board here, Mary Lou, is that we don't believe the committee doesn't believe 100% credit. It makes sense.
I agree.
And is exploring options at less of that to look at some of these trade-offs.
Yeah. No, totally agree with that.
Oh yeah. So I think the 40% here, right, I think is not optimal in the sense, but is trying to understand, given some of the concern with respect to sort of compensation and employment and equity, particularly for employed individuals whose employers are paying these things, how do we sort of think about, are there disparate impacts that we need to be considering? Go ahead, Richard, then Charlie.
One of the other things that people say about all of this is that they want to untie health insurance from the employer. And and I get that. And if we have a big credit there, then that ties people closer to their employer, which is one of the principles that we had starting out, that we kind of wanted to unhook in health insurance from being employed. And again, there's no single right answer, and any compromise between zero and 100% employer payroll tax credit is a compromise. But the idea is you didn't want people hanging around in jobs they didn't otherwise like just because they
No.
could get better. And I don't know what to do about that. So I hope we
Yep.
can come to a decision. Thank you.
No, Charlie.
So I think the other thing that we should be aware of, I mean, I just saw something about a new bill in Congress that is going to try to essentially make it easier for employers to have independent contractors rather than employees. And to the extent we have, the smaller the credit we make, the more advantageous it's going to be for the employer to say, oh, I'll just do you as a, hire you as a
Contractor.
independent contractor rather than as an employee. And I think there's lots of reasons why we want to try to avoid that. So.
Okay.
Good. All right, so I'm going to move us here to our next question. And so we led with the credit first, just because so many of the other scenarios are embedding the credit here. And so yeah, I'm getting tongue tied here. So the kind of step back piece here is really to understand sort of how the 40% credit compares to one where we don't, with respect to sort of overall progressivity once we start adjusting for household size. And so one of the things that we'll get to this one here just next, but if you notice, the feature in both these charts here is sort of the inversion of the tax paid as a percent of income for higher exemptions relative to lower exemptions, and the relative steepness that one is able to achieve here when we offer the credit. And so here, for many employers, the costs such as the premiums come out of wages, but then the EPT credit, which, since it's tied to folks with lower wages, like the credit is a way to really kind of partially offset that challenge, particularly at the lower end. And so the 40% created, the 40% credit creates a sharper distinction between those exemption groups with lower income families paying lower effective rates and then those contributions tend to rise as incomes and the exemptions start to kind of interact with each other at the higher levels. And part of the feature with the 40% too allows us to kind of more progressively scale with that in that structure. Okay, so for these.
Before going on, I had a comment. I mean, to me, these are not, or these don't help me at all, and I don't think they're going to help the board at all in making the case for or against the EPT credit. I mean, these I don't think are the appropriate graphs. I mean, these relate more to showing something kind of related to PPP, but so I just don't see these as being helpful. and to me, the more helpful things would be the things I mentioned earlier. Because I don't know, maybe other people look at them and say there's something that these tell you something, but to me, they don't tell me anything.
I agree with you, Charlie.
Okay. We'll work on that, Charlie, with you and Richard.
Okay.
Okay. Go ahead, Cheryl.
Yeah, speaking to the graphs, although I like simplicity, I do think that, at first glance anyway, it looks as though there's this really steep increase for, I would say, middle income people. Like, it's really steep, and then it kind of levels off as you get to $1 million. That's what it appears to be. So maybe we need a bit more detail or something.
Yeah, I'm wondering if this is just charts are not the right ones in the memo, but I'll go back. I know.
I mean, those are the ones from the memo, but I just think that was not, those are not helpful.
Not helpful.
And again, to Cheryl's point, I mean, why is it steep? It's because you pay no tax below federal poverty level. There's nothing, absolutely nothing, and then it's something, and so yeah, at some point you're paying something.
Yeah, I mean, sorry,
and then there's a maximum. I mean, it eventually at high enough income, you get almost to the point where you're paying. It's as if all of your income is subject to the tax, which it's not quite all of it, but almost all of it.
So with that explanation, I don't think the optics are not good on this graph. is what I'm saying. So I think maybe we need to show it a different way.
Yeah, well, I think it's worth. Yeah, we're moving a couple things A and C here together that I think probably worth just pulling out a little bit. Sorry, I don't know why my computer keeps doing that. Okay. Um, s- okay, sorry. So with the so one of the things that Richard and Charlie thought it'd be good to do is make sure that we take whatever we're trying to proposing and looking at it from an overall, I know we're trying to look at it from an overall equity perspective, like, and I think there's kind of a couple of different things moving in this one, but the idea here is to understand it on a person basis, how it functions with the credit and without the credit. And so this is kind of a think of it as how does the total liability change by offering the credit at the different households. And so go ahead, Mary Lou, and then Cheryl and Charlie.
Where do you get, I see the explanation of the 2,200. Is that 2,200 per year?
Richard,
is-
do you want to?
Yes,
I don't
that's
have
premium,
the.
that's premium and cost sharing.
Yeah.
Where did you
Or-
get that number?
Yeah, that's complicated, but KFF has those estimates about how much people pay for single insurance in small companies and single and large, and in family and small and family and large companies.
It just seems very low to me because 15 years ago, when I had an organization where we were paying for the employees for their health insurance, it was certainly larger than that.
But
And
but again, this is just individuals.
Yeah.
I know, but I had an individual who
Okay.
I paid, and hers was 375 a month. I remember that number. And so kind of
Yeah, and PEB is like $5 a month.
right. Yeah. So anyway, I don't know. It just I was wondering where you got the number. That's all. KFF, fine.
Yeah. Go ahead, Cheryl.
Yeah, I had the same comment. I'd love to know what this insurance plan is because I have a small group and I pay way
Oh,
more
sure.
than that per year per employee. Yeah,
Mhm.
very low to me.
Yeah,
Not-
we can go back and look at the comparison, but I think the instrumental, whether it's 22, 32, 42, 62, one could
Makes a
then sort of
difference.
makes a big difference. But with respect to Coda, I think the main piece here is like, well, how might that then compare to the offering of the credit versus not
Yes.
credit at the different incomes? And so we'll work on trying to get that a little more cleaner. But this just helps give you understanding of when we
Yeah.
do offer the credit, like how
What
does it sort
happens?
of change individual
Mhm.
contributions here?
One of the really big problems on private insurance is you can look up the premiums and you can look up the deductibles, but you can't look up what the typical cost sharing is. I mean, I searched that 100 ways from Sunday, and you
Not
just can't.
surprised.
You just can't tell how much people are paying. If you have a good year, you don't pay anything against your deductible. If you have a bad year, you may pay all of it, and it's hard to get those numbers.
Well, and I just want to note that I'm just worried about, again, the optics, what this looks like, that most people are doing better with status quo.
Yes.
Right.
Either way.
So,
Okay.
so I would like to make a couple points here. One is we need to make it clear that that's status quo for the employee's share of someone who is covered by their employer. First
I
of all,
get it.
so that's one thing. The other thing is, in order to make this comparison meaningful, we need to include somebody who is not employed by a large firm. So somebody who has to buy their own in the status quo, and somebody who would not get the credit in the new plan. And so we need to include, I mean, the table doesn't do enough to make the necessary comparisons. And maybe, it might be a more complicated table then, but to me, it doesn't really show what the comparison needs to show, which is how does it what is the effect on both of these plans for somebody who is not employed by a large employer? And how does that compare to the status quo for somebody who's not covered by a plan? So I think all of those things need to be there in order to make this have it make more sense.
Go ahead, John.
Yeah, actually, I just wanted to join in support of this discussion. I realized after I had read the whole document, the question I asked myself was, well, how does an individual who's employed and is getting the tax credit compare to an individual who's self-employed, not getting any tax credit, to a Medicare individual? And I went back, and to the degree I could use this table and all, and there's some pretty significant differences. and actually the worse off is the self-employed person, especially as their incomes rise. I was going to save that comment until the end, but I think the kind of comparison Charlie is talking about does need to be done. Only it should also include, I think, just to be fair, a Medicare individual. The Medicare folks, at least from the tables that were in the document, are pretty similar to the employed folks. The employed folks are better off than the Medicare folks, but the self-employed folks are paying quite a bit more for the same income, and especially at the higher levels. Anyway, I just think that this is an interesting comparison that somebody's going to do if we don't. I'm not sure it needs to delay today's discussion, by the way, but needs to be done.
So, John, can you repeat the exact question there, like with respect to a self-employed, the effect of different credits and overall burden on self-employed individuals relative to those employed or under?
Employed, self-employed, Medicare at the same income.
Yeah, and you can only look at a single individual.
Okay.
You can't bring the family stuff in.
Got it.
A single individual, Medicare, employed, and self-employed.
Got it.
Right. And so go ahead, Charlie.
I mean, so I think that can be done, and I think it's going to be useful. One difficulty we need to keep in mind is that for the Medicare person, one of the assumptions we have to make is how much of what we're putting down as their income is Social Security and how much is other, and what values should we use for that? And I expect that what would make sense is to use the average Social Security distribution or benefit for that particular AGI level and total. So, but to kind of make a reasonable comparison, because it's going to vary tremendously, with varying amounts of Social Security income, especially at the lower brackets, because Social Security will not be taxed in Oregon.
Okay, so I want to just put a bow on this one here, because I think a ton of work has been done. A ton of work has been done really quickly to bring this forward, and I think going back, there is a lot of questions around sort of one, what the optimal credit should be. Okay, and remember, today you're not voting on what the optimal credit should be or the configuration. I think what the board is looking for is, should it not be 100%, and that there is still discovery to look at sort of the effect of differing levels of credit across these things, and we'll continue to look at that. So just, I think this is the sort of work in progress piece here, is that we're making progress on this and taking that feedback in real time and working under some really tight constraints. But so all to say, we're taking all this feedback and we'll kind of continue to workshop and try to make the best case going forward. But I think for today, just to keep sort of the eye on the discussion is just the less than 100%, and coming to some conclusion on that with still work to do. Great, because I'm going to move us on to what I probably should have been the first one, but mostly because we baked in the 40% credit into these charts and introduced that question first. But remember, one of the big pieces of feedback was people found the dual nature of both from a messaging and tax perspective of both an income tax and a per person premium a bit confusing and duplicative of our current system. And so, based on our last conversation a couple weeks ago, we thought we should basically make the case that yes, we heard that, and we're moving to a structure here that functions basically as a lookup table, where you can just find your income, find your household size, and compute the tax due under the healthcare personal income tax. And so the two charts you see here really kind of just make this point a little more explicitly about specifically, not just why, I think the income tax part is fairly clear in the sense of how it's administered in Oregon, right? As your income rises, you have more tax due, but you're able to provide a set of deductions based on your exemptions that you have in your household. And that's kind of what you see in the chart on the bottom, right? Is basically this smooth sort of horizontal pro rata increase in progressivity based on income. But I think remember that our tax code, right, provides sort of, I would say, in subsidies, right, for households. So you have more income for the number of people in there. And then what we want or desire, right, from this perspective is actually to invert that a bit in our plan, is to sort of account for the fact that there's a service being delivered based on the number of people you have in your household. And so the healthcare personal income tax has to adjust for the number of people you have. And that's how you see that those convergence of your lines kind of flip, where you have households that are earning at higher levels with more exemptions paying more than households at the same income with fewer exemptions. And I think this is sort of the big structural change that we're trying to make the case here, is that, because of, think of it, the steepness of that line just means at a similar income, people with some similar numbers of households, right, are paying progressively more, or sorry, pay nominally more, but progressively fairly similar rates. And so I think that's I think one of the big sort of features of this from a sort of design perspective. Richard or Charlie, you want to say anything else on sort of this idea around how we've kind of changed the plan structurally, but also from a description perspective?
Yeah, I have something to say about that. I think that when you look at household exemption size, there are two counteracting forces. Number one, a standard feature of income tax is as household exemptions go up, your tax liability goes down. So couples at the same income pay less income tax than an individual at that same income. People get that. But when you're talking about, as you just mentioned, Morgan, is that if you're trying to insure a household for healthcare, more people in a household, statistically, you're going to use more healthcare and cost more than smaller households. And so they are offsetting. And with Charlie's brilliant tables, we can adjust that. We've got it adjusted so that below about $145,000, the exemption decreasing tax liability is dominant. And above that, the increased cost of insuring a larger household is dominant. And we can dial that back to put it at 100,000 or at 150,000, but it's in there. But just keep in mind, they're two different things. So instead of calling it the per person premium, we just say it's adjusted for household size. We hope this is a better iteration. If you don't like it, let us know and we'll come up with something else. But that's how they're offset. Mary Lou, how'd I do?
That was good. That was good. But my question, and this is maybe just showing my total ignorance, and I had a high school debate coach who drilled into your head, do not display your ignorance. Okay, sorry. So I'm now going against this standard of mine. What is that top line at the 6%? So what is that one?
Yeah, Charlie, you want to explain that real quick?
Yeah, so that is the zero exemption line. So people file returns with zero exemptions. Presumably, those are dependents who are probably from a wealthy household for the most part, or at least much higher income than what they're showing. And because we're basing on a federal poverty level, and federal poverty level for zero people is zero, that's how it plays out. So those are the zero exemption returns. And one of the things that we need to think about, and I've been thinking about this a little bit, is how are we going to, I mean, I don't think we need to put this in legislation even, but somewhere it has to be decided. How are people going to be filing taxes in Oregon? Are they going, is the current income tax going to be one thing, and then they just sort of build on that with the this new tax structure? And will we allow people to say, okay, for the current Oregon income tax, I'm going to file, with my dependent filing independently, and I'm going to file a joint return and do this. And then for my healthcare tax, we're going to file as a household. I mean, so all those things are going to matter in how it gets calculated. But that line is the dependents, basically, who have filed their own returns.
Who is a zero dependent? Help me. I mean, my daughter is single.
So
Is she
so
at
not
one
not
exemption?
it's not a thing. It's like a child of a suppose you're a high schooler and you made some money. One of those, that money could be your wages could be included on your parents' return, or, and this is often done, you file independently. You file your own return, and so that your parents aren't paying their taxes on your
Right.
income.
Yeah, so
And so
one of my
basically
high
it's
school
kids.
kids referees, and it's like a contractor technically.
Yes.
And so she has to file a return separately. It's an amended return, but she's a zero exemption return. So she pays like kind of
So
full
as a
taxes
single
on.
person, she's not one, she's
Yeah.
zero.
Yeah, she's zero.
Well, it's not a single person, it's a child.
It's
It's a
a
child
child,
who's
yeah.
dependent
Well,
on somebody.
It could be
A
a young
dependent
person
child. Yeah.
under age 26 who's out of the household, but still on their parents.
Yeah, exactly. It could be up to 26, yeah.
Okay.
And it could also be somebody else who is a dependent on you. I mean, there's a variety of ways you can be a dependent. You can, as long as somebody else is providing most of your income for you, then if you file separately, you're dependent on them and you cannot claim an exemption.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah.
It's kind of
It's a
weird.
I would say it's more of an artifact of our tax structure as opposed to a real true policy kind of piece, but we're showing it here for.
We can take it out.
Yeah.
I would take it out. I think
We-
it simply
Yeah.
confuses people. I understand. I had high school kids too at one point, but I never thought about how they were exemptions or not, I understand now. Thank you, but I think it's,
No, thanks, Mary Lou. I think it's an important question
I'm
because
sorry.
it's not self-obvious. Cheryl.
I just have a quick question, and I'm a little worried about the timing and whether we'll get to our decisions. I know you have a lot of examples to share yet to help us understand.
6 more slides.
Okay, but I just wanted to ask, as part of our decision making, are we going to narrow down the numbers of these plans, or we're just going to share, 6 or 8 or whatever plans with the board? I'm just curious about that part.
Good question, Mimi. My sense here is we wouldn't propose a specific plan. Like we're not voting on that today. What we're voting on is really to say, hey, we heard the structural feedback and we are responding to that. And here's the directions we're headed. But we're still fine tuning kind of like a proposal.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Correct me if I'm wrong, Mimi.
No, that's absolutely correct.
Okay. Oh, Charlie.
Yeah. So I've got a couple of comments. I'm not sure. You're including another one. To me, for this, the most important slide is the one that shows that compares with the PPP and without the PPP at the higher AGI levels.
I don't have that one.
All the exemptions.
I don't have that. Why don't you talk that one through, Charlie? I think part of the challenge here.
Well,
there's a million things.
so before I do, I want to say a couple other things. So when I was looking at your explanation of why we should include the PPP, I don't think it was explained right. And also, when I was trying to explain it right, I was like, it's probably not worth it. I mean, I have been a strong proponent of this because I absolutely do think that higher income, larger households should pay more than smaller households with the same income. But I think that trying to do so introduces complications, and it doesn't come out quite the way I was hoping it would come out when I tried to do it. And at this point, my suggestion is we abandon it and keep it much simpler by not having it. So I would say if other people are okay with that, that we should maybe just say, we've looked at it carefully and we tried to explain why we should have it. And in trying to explain why we should have it, we decided maybe we shouldn't have it. It's a lot easier if we don't.
I totally agree.
Go ahead, Richard.
Well, but we don't need to show these graphs to the citizenry because they haven't been helpful for us to understand. But all we can say is you have a tax table, and the tax table costs more for larger families. All other things staying the same. So I don't know why that's hard to explain. So I just
Well, I mean, so it's the tax table would look a whole lot simpler without this in it.
Yeah,
for one thing.
Yeah.
And another thing is that when you try to if I look through Echo Northwest's attempt to try to explain why it's there, it's like that it doesn't explain it to me. And when I tried to change those words and come up with words that did explain it in a way that said this is why it makes sense, is like it didn't make enough sense to make it worthwhile. I mean, and it's a relatively small thing. I mean, it does lower the overall tax rate, which I think is a good thing. So it does actually help, in general, lower income households, but it is primarily helping the no exemption and the single exemption returns, and everybody else. And it's also helping the very highest income people because of the overall lower tax rate because of the PPP. And so where is it hurting? It's hurting those who are essentially between about 450 to 600% of federal poverty level for the number of exemptions they have. Those where it's coming from. And when I see its actual effect, it's like, I don't think it's worth it anymore. That's my general feeling. I mean, we can still look at it, but to me, it's like it's not worth the complication, and it's not really quite doing what I was hoping it would do.
So just say maybe back to you, Charlie, is the inclusion of sort of the household adjustment, whether we call it PPP, but basically,
right. Yeah, household adjustment, right? Yes,
household adjustment is coming at the cost of particularly high, smaller households.
No, at larger households at a pretty high income, but not at the highest income. So pretty much between like 450 and 600% of federal poverty level households. That's who is paying. Larger households are paying more, and it's primarily helping everybody who is filing a no exempt return, a single exemption return, and it's helping the highest income bracket. And then it's
because
also
we are raising more money through the household adjustment. There are lower effective taxes at the higher income for smaller one exemption or zero or one or two exemption.
Even for the 8 exemption, very wealthy households. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, and that to me is, I mean, if you were going to show what effect it has, and I included this plot in something that I think I'd sent it to you, but I sent a lot of things out. So it shows which households are benefiting, and there's a slight. It costs a little bit more for a lot of low income households, but it's on the order of like $1 or $2 a year more for the high exemption number small households. But anyway, it's not to me, it is not doing quite what I was hoping it would do, and it's not benefiting the enough the places that I wanted to have benefited. And as I try to think of how to make it do differently to do more what I want, it's like it's not worth the complication. And it does make it more complicated, even though, yes, Richard is right. It's not that hard to do in a text table, but it's a lot easier if you don't have it in.
What's everybody else think? John,
Yeah.
Bethany, Jeff? This is a critical one. Should big families pay more, all other things being equal? Because the difference in a family for regular insurance, KFF, it's instead of 2,000, it's like 6,000. So
Right.
families cost a
Yeah.
lot more.
Yeah.
And PEB has 4 levels. They have individual, individual plus partner, individual plus child, and family. So they have 4 different levels, and they vary greatly. They go all the way from $12,000 to $30,000. So
Yeah.
It's out there. What do you
I
think?
mean, if we do include it, then we're gonna have to work on the explanations, I think, quite a bit more to the board, because that part did not make sense.
If I may,
And
I'm not,
we
I'm not
could try to
weighing,
do it. Yeah.
I'm not weighing in with an opinion, but so I'm not doing that. But what I would like to say is, I would like you all to consider whether or not this is also a board level decision to make this decision. So in other words, you could present it. The decision you're going to make today is whether you should present this concept to the board or not. So I'm just going to leave it at that. Thank you.
And in order to do that, I mean, if we're going to present it, I think we do need to include one more chart at least, and we need to change the wording in the memo quite a bit. The key findings and the interpretation that was in the memo didn't make sense. And I guess I would say, I would agree with Mimi that we probably just want to present how it would look, and the key findings and interpretations. But we need a little bit more in order to give the board enough information to have them make a reasonable choice on it.
Mary Lou, then Jeff.
Okay, as a board member, I would say the explanation that Richard gave, which was kind of a simple one, without a whole bunch of charts and graphs, is maybe a better explanation of, do we want in, the background that will be in a tax table to have a factor in there that relates to family size or not. But all of these graphs and all of this detail, I think, is where, as I'm sitting here and have been on this finance committee now for several months, and I'm spending quite a bit of time and twisting my brain around it, but the other board members aren't. And so I think it just, and also the general public. Now everybody can watch these videos and see us struggling and discussing it and the pros and the cons, which is great. But I think kind of people who aren't watching it as closely maybe will watch the board meeting if they want to, really figure out what's going on. And I just think adding to confusion, because I keep getting more and more questions when I run into people, well, explain to me, why is this? And I heard that, and I heard about this PPP, or, and I just think it's more confusing unless we just simply say that, should we, just as Richard said, should in the background that we be favoring smaller families than, making larger families pay something, but you had it eloquent, Richard, that's all.
Go ahead.
I would say it's more complicated than that, because certainly at low incomes, I don't think there's any question about we should be favoring
Large families.
larger families. Larger families should
Yes.
pay less. So I think there's no question about that. So the question is really, should we do a readjustment at higher incomes so that's no longer the case? So it's slightly different than what Richard said, but it's really a readjustment so that changes from what's going on at low incomes to, at higher incomes, larger families pay more. So that's really the change.
Okay.
So maybe the feedback here formally is we heard your response about the confusing nature of the PPP. We are trying to adjust it to reflect a principle around this household adjustment. But we're trying to, I think, Charlie, if I get this right, understand sort of the equity effects of offering something like that, particularly as incomes grow and relative to the, effective tax rates of people, at the lower ends, right? So it's really kind of like, can you design a household adjustment factor in a way that's in line with the committee's principles around equity?
Well, I think we should, first of all, it needs to be called a readjustment because we already have a household adjustment factor.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
we should say a readjustment as incomes grow. And in order to, again, we don't have the one that I think explains it best, which may or may not help Mary Lou, but I think it would. And that is the one that shows for large incomes, smaller households pay more than large households. And do we want to have that? If we don't have this readjustment, that's what happens. And is that something we want to have happen?
Okay. John. Oh, you're on mute.
Yeah, I mean, my 2 cents. I think we need to get rid of the term PPP.
Got it.
Gone. It's gone.
Yeah.
Charlie never said it.
And if we're going to do anything, just use the term household adjustment.
Yep.
And my preference would be to work this through without the household adjustment and show then what would happen with a household adjustment.
Okay.
And I completely agree with Mimi's comment that this and a variety of other tweaks, if you will, are for the board to decide. It's going to be that way no matter. We could keep talking for Guinness World Record lengths here, and there still are going to be a lot of tweaks between now and what is eventually felt to be fair and equitable.
Yeah. Thank you, John. Jeff?
Thank you. I agree certainly with the comment about we should not be penalizing or, if you will, rewarding size of family. So I think there's agreement around the group on that basic principle. But I do disagree about our not making a recommendation to the board. We are the Finance Revenue Committee. We can identify the several options we are looking at. We can identify the one that we think is the best, and then acknowledge that it is the board's final decision. Having watched some of the board meetings, I think we do a disservice to them and to ourselves if we don't say what our recommended choice is. If they want to change it, it is their prerogative, but we should give them our recommendation and alternatives.
Cheryl?
I just wanted to say I'm all in with getting rid of the PPP terminology. So number 1. Number 2, I was going to say I feel comfortable recommending a certain number of alternatives to the board, but not making one recommendation. But I do see Jeff's point of like, this is how we would rank them or something like that. Like, we think this is the best and then maybe this and this. I don't think we're there yet, but I'm kind of torn a little bit between those two suggestions. So yeah, maybe I'll get there.
But Jim, I agree, we're not there yet, but just to reinforce, we should make a recommendation and rank them. That means we can't do it this month, and we do it in a subsequent meeting.
Yep.
I'd still
Sorry.
like to get some feedback from the board because all these iterations are very helpful. I mean, just in the meeting, the last hour and 6 minutes, I see what's effective for y'all and what isn't, and each iteration we're getting better and better and better and getting closer. So my vote would be at least present something to the board so they can see what we're struggling with.
Mary Lou?
Well, I keep going back to, I'm sorry, I don't want to underestimate the other board members, but this really is, at a level that it's taken a lot of us, and, me, and maybe I'm the slowest learner on here. But other board members at a board meeting when we've got, 20 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever it is, and we're presenting all of this stuff. I think Richard was there at the last one, and I don't know that people that we keep talking about the board just like the board keeps talking about the legislature. I mean, the fact is that there is a handful of people who are working really hard to understand this, et cetera, and then kind of like, okay, the board, as I've seen, at least in my time there, it pretty much follows along with whatever the recommendation has been without a whole bunch of in-depth, when you go back to the principles, yes, I think that's where the board, has strong belief and really wants to be sure that those equity principles, et cetera. But I think that what we have struggled with, and all the people on this group are believing it's not like we have different principles than they have. And so I think that more time explaining it, I'm just not sure at what depth you really think the board is going to be giving you, other than on the principles. Because when it gets into these details, you have to be someone like Charlie or Richard or Morgan, in my mind, Jeff maybe, but to really go into depth on it. So anyway, that's
Mary Lou, your point's well taken in terms of like what's the appropriate level of sort of feedback to the feedback, and
Yeah.
like at what level can the board sort of give you a
Right.
thumbs up, and you're dealing with the issue substantively. Okay, thank you, Cheryl.
No, that was me. So Cheryl has something.
Oh, sure, thank you, Cheryl. Sorry,
Actually,
there should have been a pause in there.
Yeah, I actually think the board asked lots of questions and had an in-depth discussion last time, so I give them a bit more credit. But anyway, I do think though, when we get to this level of detail and complexity, we certainly need more than 20 minutes on the board meeting schedule. So I think it's more about the time than the depth. And I mean, I'm going to say right here, I absolutely need Richard and Charlie and Echo Northwest to help present these ideas, because this is not my area of expertise. So I'm going to freely admit that here. But I do think about it, and I do react as an individual and as a small business owner, and I mean, an Oregonian. So yeah, so I think we just need more time to discuss, and it may take more than one board meeting too to really get through this. I'm sure it will, actually. Yeah.
This was the same chart here, just showing, I think, on a sort of income sort of status quo payment. And I think the thing that's important to reflect here, right, is basically and this is, I think, along the lines of what the issue Charlie was raising here is like, you would look at this just as a sort of, oh, hey, look at Plan E just costs everybody a lot less. We should do this. But Richard, I think Charlie's point is, I mean, part of the point of Plan A with the household adjustments, right, versus Plan E, the no household adjustments, was so that we had sort of proportionally larger households paying more to reflect that sort of utilization. And so what's happening here, right, at the lower levels, right, I think is something that I think Charlie talked about, is that what's happening is perhaps with that adjustment, higher income, no dependents, right, are actually paying proportionally less than they would
Yes.
otherwise. So I think it's important to sort of like, the idea here is to show burden kind of pre and post, but what's really being shown is the flip side of this question that we still need to explore on whether, and I think in line with the board's direction, can we do away with talking about the PPP? I think the direction I think is being said here is yes, and we're contemplating anywhere from revaluing those assessments to all the way to potentially moving away from them for a variety of reasons, and we need to explain exactly why that's the case. Okay, I'm gonna move us along here. I think one of the things that, oh, go ahead, Charlie.
Yeah, so if, for wording purposes, if
Yeah.
we're going to continue to present this, I would say it's the Plan A has family size readjustments or something like that, not
Yeah.
family sizing, because there's already no matter what we have. I mean, there's family sizing in there just because the federal poverty level exemption. So it's
Yep.
a family
I
size
think we'll call them
readjustment.
household adjustments. I think we're
Household
shorthand
adjustment,
of the
yeah.
chart. But yeah, we'll
Household size adjustments, readjustments again, readjustment.
readjustments. Yep. Okay. Richard, do you want to talk a little bit about the chart you put together here for self-employed? And I think, John raised this question earlier too, with respect to sort of the use of the credits here.
So in the first column, you have the Affordable Care Act status quo. And again, that varies by income. At 400% of federal poverty level, you stop getting ACA credits. I mean, everybody stops getting it the way the HR1 is, but doing it in 2025 terms, you lose your credits at a 400% federal poverty level, which for a self-employed individual is going to be around $50,000, 14,000 times 4, $56,000. Okay, so anyway, that's why you have the ACA civil status quo. That's both premium that the individual pays and cost sharing. Again, controversial how much cost sharing there is, but that's what's in there. And then Plan A has the employer payroll tax credit, and Plan C doesn't. With no,
Yeah.
both have family sizing, although this is just one exemption. And then neither one has a soft cap. So really what this is looking at is self-employed versus someone who is getting a credit from their employer under Plan A.
Exactly. So part of it's the credits, but also the fact that, well, actually it's all the credit, excuse me, but like the effect of like not having the credit, right, is basically lower income tax, healthcare personal income tax rates in Plan C relative to Plan A, because you're not having to raise that in revenue because you've raised it through the EPT already. Charlie.
So this is where I think that this slide and the previous slide should be put together so that we can compare Plan A and Plan C for both the self-employed and the employed by a large firm people, so you can actually see why is it, wait, your Plan A is paying more, or if with Plan A you pay more, that's not good. But you see that if your employer is actually paying a bunch of taxes for you, or because they're employing you, then you pay less. And so I think you need to have two more columns: Plan A, large employer, Plan C, and those two things can be put together, and it's a much more rational comparison.
No, those are really two good points, right? That with respect to sort of what's happening with the credit and the effective tax rates on individuals, it's this trade-off between, every dollar we don't necessarily kind of raise directly through the EPT, right, has to be offset with a either higher or lower personal income tax rate.
But you see the challenge here of help paying for healthcare. Look at that income along the left-hand side, 50, 70, 100, 150, 250. Then look at the ACA status quo plan. Starts out at 4,500, goes to 7,200, but doesn't keep going up once you reach 100,000. Why is that? Well, because people with high incomes don't necessarily have more expensive health insurance or more expensive costs than people with low insurance. So that's why this issue of we can charge more for some families, but at some point that effect peters out and the overall income factors in more heavily. So it's complicated with healthcare because even though you have more money, you don't necessarily use more of regular healthcare.
Yeah, sure.
It just occurred to me, I imagine these ACA premiums don't reflect the increases beginning in January, do they?
No.
Okay.
Great. And then the obviously within this committee, through John and through the board, there was a question around sort of double payment, double taxation, and a question of fairness. with respect to those individuals that are enrolled in Medicare and particularly paying Part B premiums for that additional service or insurance. And so what Charlie's scenarios here would take a look at different levels of the credit and then to contemplate sort of what that really means with respect to individuals at different income and source of income sources would be paying as part of these different plans. And so this really kind of looks at kind of that 0% credit, 50% credit, and then a full credit. And Richard, do you want to walk us through this table here a bit?
So
Yeah.
here we're just looking at we're trying to isolate the effect of having a premium credit for Part B. And D is 0%, Plan A is 50%, and Plan F is 100%. And now what Charlie spoke to before, I have Social Security income and other income there, just making it up. But at the same point, Social Security income of $70,000 a year, that's at the very high end. So I paired that with a higher other income because that makes sense. But again, we can create different tables for that to get a total income there. But you can see that as you get 100% credit for your Part B premiums, which go up with income as well because of the income related monthly adjustment amount, or so-called IRMA, that you can see that having that credit for Part B makes a difference. It makes a difference, especially at higher incomes. Oh, and then also traditional Medicare and traditional Medicare Advantage, like dealing with any kind of insurance, you have the premiums and then you have the cost sharing, and it's hard. And Charlie and I figured traditional and Medicare using completely different tables, and we came out similar in terms of the relationship to traditional Medicare, with 92% of people having a Medicare supplement plan cost more generally than Medicare Advantage. And that's true, as you read in the paper, that Medicare Advantage gets a lot higher Medicare payments from CMS than traditional Medicare. So Charlie and I agree on that, whether that difference is $4,500 to $5,500 or whether it's 6,000 versus 7,000. Reasonable people can disagree on the ways to, but you can see traditional Medicare costs more than Medicare Advantage for most users.
Charlie.
So one thing I think needs to be made clear is that under our plans, Plan D, Plan A, Plan F, it is both the healthcare personal income tax and the Part D premium or Part B premium that people are paying. So for example, at 30,000 of other income and 30,000 Social Security, that 4,082, that is all the Part B premium. None of it is for there's no Oregon income tax at this point, or no healthcare income tax on that. And I guess the other thing that should be made clear is I think this is for two beneficiaries, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. So that should be clear on the slide as well.
Great. John, I'm going to call on you just to see if there are any other questions or perspectives on this. But I think the formal response here is that the group is looking at some level of credit. Is that right, Richard here and Charlie, to respond to this question of sort of double payment on the on the Medicare payments on the
my recommendation is that we recommend 100% Medicare Part B credit, because I don't think it looks too unfair if we don't, in my mind. And that, again, this chart doesn't quite get at that, but what John was suggesting earlier, comparing the Medicare person with somebody who has everything but not, could help. But that would be this slide is already busy enough. It would be perhaps another place where we could compare that.
Yeah, that's right. This is the table that made me think when I saw, okay, here's a Medicare person at 220,000 income. And they're going to pay 12,000 with the tax credit. How does that compare to a self-employed person with an income of 220,000? Okay. And how does it compare to an employed person? Just one, one exemption. So to avoid all the family, at least when I look at the other charts, I think there's some pretty significant differences there, and I'm
Okay.
not sure that makes sense.
You're not sure what makes sense.
That especially at the wealthy end, if you're making $250,000, whether you're making it from Social Security and your retirement plans, or from your self-employment income, or from your employed income, it doesn't seem there should be a huge difference in what you're going to
Okay.
pay.
Thank you.
And,
So
and
what I'm hearing is comb it multiple different ways, and that's the best way to get it over. Comb it through from the point of view of the same income level from employed, self-employed, Medicare, and do that across different income levels, and then comb it in terms of different kinds of premiums at the same income. I mean, different kinds of credits at the same income. That those tables will help. So I got that. We'll do that.
Yeah, and by the way, I mean, from what I could guess at, the employed person isn't too far from the Medicare person. They're in better shape than the Medicare person, but they're close. But the self-employed person was much higher contribution. But I can only guess, looking at the other tables.
Well, that argues against a high EPT credit then.
That's right. Well, but no, I mean, the high EPT credit in Medicare were similar. What may be the problem here is we're not giving any credit to the self-employed person. They get no credit. The Medicare person gets a credit. The employed person gets a credit, but the self-employed person doesn't.
Please do. I'm sorry.
No, I think that's the problem, but I'm not sure.
Okay, got it.
Go ahead, Charlie.
I can see what John is saying, but I would argue the Medicare person is there's a lot. The Medicare person has essentially paid in for their whole life while they're working in order. I mean, again, the tax doesn't cover much of it, but it covers like 40% or something. I forget what number. The taxes they have paid in for their whole life were paid in so they could get Medicare. So they've already done that. And that's part of what I think Chunwei was getting at when he said, we should figure out a way to give the Medicare people some credit for what they've paid in for their whole life. And so to me, the fact that they're lower makes a lot of sense. And it is part of what makes it fair. If they were not a lot lower, it wouldn't be fair. And then for the employed person, their employer is paying a whole lot. I mean, I understand that many people don't believe that comes out of their wages, but I completely disagree. And so I think that that to me also makes sense. But that's something that's going to have to be argued amongst, in my view, it's going to have to be argued against many Oregonians weighing in on the tax plan. And so we need to have several possibilities so that many Oregonians can weigh in on the possibilities and give their opinion on these questions as well. Otherwise, they're probably not going to support it.
Any other discussion on sort of the credit piece?
Well, what I'm hearing is people seem to be a little more favorable to a high credit for Part B premiums.
Yes, that's what I'm hearing.
So it helps to be able to trim off these
Yes.
branches.
Yeah, I haven't heard much pushback. I think Charlie articulated 100% credit as sort of the piece I see Mary Lou raising her thumb there. So Cheryl.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask if we all agree on choosing the 100% credit. It seems like we have consensus, but I just wanted to make sure. Anybody disagree? Okay.
Right.
Thank you.
Move us along here. So the last piece was with respect to the soft cap. And so some of the plans here, it's hard to draw apples to apples. So I actually went back and just kind of messed around with one of Charlie's scenario tools here, and I'll show just the table real quick. But I think the question, is a difficult one. And it's worth some conversation around how precise you want to be. But I think the feedback was really about fairness with respect to why have a soft cap at all, right? And I think if I had to sort of shorthand it, the reason to have a soft cap is one, we want to keep it in line, some reasonable basis of the contributions relative to kind of the status quo, what people are currently paying and what they would pay in a revised plan. And then I think second, if I understand, it's kind of a fairness question. The second one is a more legitimate sort of revenue worry, is if high wage earners or income earners in the state feel like they're being overtaxed, you would have some sort of like human capital flight to somewhere else. I think were the kind of the reasons of why I would say the shorthand of why the cap is there. The effect of the cap, right, is basically, if you versus, it's a hard to understand counterfactual. It's like, would the rate be lower or higher if you didn't have it, right? It all depends on, I think, your question about would those people lose, would those higher income individuals lose, and you have to raise that revenue somewhere else. So I don't know the exact answer to that, but I think that's the kind of the steel man version of kind of why the soft cap is there, and other folks might have additional thoughts. And so the feedback from the board was, should we have something like this, right? To what extent should we be entertaining a threshold of total contributions as the sort of current proposal has? And then even if it does have a sort of threshold, what might be the right sort of like decrease in the marginal rate? So in the original straw proposal, it dropped, went from about 9% down to 3%, but one can think of rates lower than that. So I just put together a quick just table to support this conversation. This is just kind of looking at, status quo in terms of the, different kind of wages with 2 exemptions. Plan A is really kind of the soft cap at 30,000, but really no soft cap basically. Sorry, the rate at 9.2% exists whether you contribute 30,000 or 60,000, right? It's, your income is being taxed at the same piece. I then put in the having that soft cap to roughly 4.5%, and that's just an arbitrary number that says half, and then monkeyed around with a small decrease in the sort of total contribution. This is mostly just to help sort of seed the conversation around how do you want to sort of respond to this question to the board around how to think about this question going forward. So go ahead, Charlie, and then Richard.
So the way you have written it in here does not implement the soft cap the way it is implemented in the revenue calculator. But that might not be the right way to do it. But to me, another way that would be simpler to do it would just be to have a tax table marginal rate that gets lower at some point. And so, I mean, the way the soft cap is now, it doesn't do anything until you've paid more than 30,000 in taxes, until your tax liability is greater than 30,000, and then it lowers the rate. So these numbers are not actually correct for the way it is currently calculated. We could come up with something like this.
And part of it, what you're seeing, there's the effect of the credits too. I think, Charlie, too. I think that's kind of what's partial what's happening.
Well, okay. So this is all wages. Okay.
Yeah, this is all wages.
Oh, yeah. Then it makes sense. Okay, I take
sorry,
it back.
I should have clarified that.
Yeah. Okay. So all of that income is wages. Okay, then it makes sense.
Okay.
Yeah. So these are probably right.
I was like, hopefully, I was using the model correctly.
Yeah. Okay. So just to give a little history on why would anybody think of doing this? I guess we want it to be progressive. So some of you probably remember that Measure 23 back in 2002, which was a universal health care plan for Oregon that was put on the ballot, and it got soundly defeated. One of the things that was in there was a hard cap, so that no matter what your taxes, no matter how much income you had, you never paid more than 25,000 in the new healthcare dedicated income tax. And so to me, that's really unfair to have a hard cap. And so then, well, how could you make it still not, get up to like some people having to pay $1 million for their healthcare, but yet not have a hard cap like that. And so that's why the soft cap came in a notion that, yeah, the marginal rate wouldn't go down to zero, but it would be something so that for every dollar more in income you earned, you paid a little bit more in healthcare, but you didn't get to the point where some people were going to be paying $1 million in their healthcare taxes. Now, maybe don't want that. Maybe we want people to be paying $1 million in their healthcare taxes if they have enough income to do so. But to me, that's the history of why it's there. Another thing to keep in mind, and this is something I've just started working on. I'll make a couple of suggestions here. So Warren George created I think a very interesting report for the task force that delves into what does the current system do for, well, how much of the current system's healthcare payments come from each quintile of income. And then his suggestion was to think about, well, what's that going to do with the new system that we're proposing? And I've just started to work on trying to come up with something like that based upon the expenditures in the Oregon system now. I mean, currently, the highest quintile pays well over 50% of the healthcare expenditures, but they have about 60% of all income. And with any of the tax plans we're proposing, they would pay way more. The highest quintile would pay way more than they are now. It's in terms of their share of expenditures. So that's true even with the soft cap in there. So to me, there's a number of other things we need to think about when we're thinking about equity, and I don't think we're prepared to say anything about that. I would say that what we want to say to the board is the soft cap would make the tax not progressive, but we're not sure. I'm not sure we're ready to completely give up on it. We want to continue to present it in case the public says something about that. That's my view. That I think at this point, I would say it's not a preferred thing for me, maybe for others either, but it is something that we want to continue to have available to be thought about in discussions.
Other perspectives on this question at the top end of the income side of things. Mary Lou.
Well, Charlie, when you talk about, the public weighing in, et cetera, we know that just always the rich and powerful always weigh in at, much to their advantage, where low income people really are too busy with their noses to the grindstone to even pay attention to any of this. I think that one of the things is that we have to remember that over 1 million people right now in Oregon pay nothing for their health care with the Oregon Health Plan. That there are only 4 million people in this state. So 1/4 of the people are paying nothing. And are they going to be really weighing in at this? I mean, I don't know whether I really want to talk or worry about, that weighing in factor, because they will weigh in, the high income people. But is that really my sense of equity and fairness? Is they've got that, many millions of dollars of income, whatever, how we would class that. I'm not opposed to them continuing to pay that higher rate. That's just my own personal thing, but they will weigh in. And I can tell you what they're going to say.
Charlie.
So I actually want to bring up something else that has been brought up by at least a couple of commenters who have made public comments at our meetings. And that's the notion that, yes, very low income people pay nothing now, but we shouldn't necessarily preclude or say that they're going to continue to have to pay absolutely nothing. Several people brought up the notion of ownership, that, you know, if you ask them to pay, say, I don't know, 1% of their income or something like that, for those who are below 138% of federal poverty level, or some small amount, so that they feel like they own it, they have ownership of it. Yes, we're contributing to this as well. That may not be a bad thing. It may actually be something we want to consider doing. And so I think that's something we should keep in mind. And as far as weighing in, my expectation is that the high income people will probably not weigh in when we're collecting public comment. When they're going to weigh in is when it's on the ballot. And they're going to weigh in a way that is, well, you can understand what I'm worried about, I think. So I'll just stop there.
Others on this topic, because I think right now, I think what I hear is let's may not be the preferred option, but it's important to sort of elucidate this area where I would say maybe reasonable people may have different opinions. So we need to keep it alive as part of the pros and cons of kind of why it's being there, and so that the board feels fully informed. Go ahead, Jeff, and then Cheryl.
Thank you. I agree with Charlie about when people are going to weigh in, and also agree with Mary about when people weigh in. If this recommendation makes it all the way through the legislature and onto the ballot, that's when people will start weighing in. But I also think that if the plan design or the operations committee, I don't remember which meeting, had an extensive conversation at the recent meeting talking about induced demand with going to PEB Plus. And if we are going to talk about induced demand because of PEB Plus, I think we also have to factor into the numbers, if you will, reduced supply on the revenue side.
No, I think that's my point is well taken with respect to sort of the fullness of the conversation. Cheryl, and then John.
First, I want to understand what the recommendation on the table is with the soft cap. I'm not sure I've completely tracked that. Second, I want to suggest that we hear the public comment before we vote today, if that's okay with the rest of you on the committee. We have 3 people signed up for public comment, so we need to do that fairly soon. I don't remember, how many more slides do you have, Morgan?
This is the last one.
Oh, okay. All right, so we'll finish up with the slides, and then I would like to do public comment first before we decide.
Yeah. So back to your question, I think the recommendation is, we heard you on your concerns around the soft cap. We don't have we have maybe preferences for if it should be there or not, but it should be included around sort of at least at this point, part of the continued consideration, both from a equity revenue perspective.
But
I think if I had to summarize it quickly.
I didn't hear us land on anything specific. Okay.
Yeah, I don't think there's a proposal to
Okay.
have, yes, at 30,000 at 5%. Like that's, I think what I'm hearing is like, let's
Okay.
keep it analytically alive, because it's going to
Uh-huh.
be an important part of the conversation at the revenue and equity and fairness
Okay.
elements.
Just wanna make
Go
sure.
ahead, John.
Thanks, Morgan.
Yeah, I think I'm in the camp of no no cap at this point. I think the board or people going forward will see that we did consider that, and so it's obviously an option that they could pursue. I think we have to stop thinking about this as we would in a market-driven, quote, dysfunctional market-driven, insurance-oriented arrangement. This isn't going to work unless our society, our culture, decides we want to do things differently.
Yeah.
I hope we're able to reach out to the wealthy folks in Oregon and say, here's what we decided. Talk to us. When you hear that the numbers are, the wealthiest 5% have 60% of the resources. How can you not come to the kind of conclusion we're seeing? And then I would, just to end with, I was at a meeting a decade ago that was all about demand. All about demand. It was a national campaign to really try and deal with inappropriate demand, unnecessary care. And Don Berwick, in his opening remarks, made it clear that in his mind, the research was clear. All demand eventually can be traced back to the seller. All demand.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, people don't demand, this or that in cars. They're told by the seller through a variety of creative ways that this is what they should have. So we just have to think differently. If we don't think differently, this isn't going to work. And hopefully we can convince other people in Oregon to think differently. They have done that in the past. We'll just have to keep our fingers crossed that we can do it. So that's why I'm in the no cap.
Right. Thanks, John. Mary Lou.
I'm totally with John.
Okay. Yeah, so I think the formal responses, I would say, some members have expressed sort of, desire to not have the cap, right, in response to sort of equity and funding perspectives, but there are other perspectives here that are important to consider with respect to sort of fairness and sort of potential capital flight and the impact on revenue. And we should just talk about what that is and why we think the case. But I think that's the kind of, I'll call it the recommendation on the feedback on the soft cap, a quick summary of it. All right, Cheryl, I'll turn it back to you and Mimi. That brings us to the end, unless others have additional thoughts on I guess the main pieces. I think, if I had to do a quick summary, maybe that's helpful. So the first one here is about the structure of the, no more PPP. We're talking about a household adjustment factor as part of the healthcare personal income tax. And I think the consensus here is, yes, we heard you. We are reevaluating it. We've done some analysis, and we believe that potentially we might explore it going away completely. I think is kind of the kind of recommended sort of feedback to the board. The second one is about having less than 100% credit on the EPT, and I think the recommendation is yes, we should have less. And the committee continues to look at sort of the different trade-offs at different levels of credit across the income spectrum. The third is offering credit on Medicare purchases. Part B, excuse me. Getting tongue-tied late here. And I think the recommendation is to have 100% credit on those payments. And then the last one, I think, I just reiterate on the sort of reflections back preference and sort of kind of other considerations on sort of the inclusion of a soft cap.
Thanks for summarizing those four different considerations. And before we vote, we would really like to do the public comment first. So I'm going to turn it over to Isabel.
Thank you. Yes, as always, we really appreciate members of the public providing public comment. Written public comment submissions can be found on our website, posted with today's meeting materials. To sign up for public comment, you can submit written public comment at any time via the website, and we cut that off at 72 hours in advance of the meeting so we can get everything prepared. And for oral public comment, like we're about to do, we ask that people sign up 24 hours in advance. We have 3 people signed up today. You will each have about 2 minutes for your public comment, and I will display a timer on the screen. And we ask that you kind of wrap up when that 2-minute timer winds down. The first person who is signed up today is Becky. So Becky, whenever you are ready, you may begin. Becky, you should be able to unmute now if you're here and ready to give your public comment today. Okay, we'll come back to Becky. Next is Alex. So Alex, whenever you're ready.
Thank you. Can you see me and hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much. You folks are doing great work. I had a bunch of comments and you pretty much went over the comments I had. You already addressed. So like some of those charts, I really like that you got rid of the confusing charts. Yeah, Charlie's suggestion about more comparisons. I was going to make a comment about that, so that's great. More cases. So I really I really like the direction you went in. Just one comment about as far as the EPT. I think again Richard's comment about disengaging work employment from healthcare is valid. So I will say. I do think that the analysis was a bit slanted in favor of keeping the EPT, but I understand you're going to keep that comparison in for the board's evaluation. One thing I wanted to mention, I love you're getting rid of the PPP. I made public comment before about that. As far as the household readjustment factor that you're putting in there, I think it's a good idea in principle. I think I like the idea of it being incorporated just as in the marginal tax tables, so that you don't even have to, I like what Richard said about it. You can just say, okay, people who have a lot of money and big families are going to pay more. You don't need to have a lot of explanation beyond that. I think you could apply the same thing to this soft cap. You don't even need to call it a soft cap. You could, if you want, just put that in the marginal tables. And again, just say very simply, people who are paying a lot more than they would ordinarily pay at higher incomes are going to get, not pay quite the same tax rate. I mean, I think there's ways to incorporate this without raising a lot of red flags, which you're going to get when you go put this on a roadshow and try and sell it to Oregonians. Anyway, I'm past my 2 minutes. Thanks again for listening and for all your work.
Thank you. And next, we have Lou.
Hey, thank you. First of all, I'm a little confused. I don't know when these rates would be applied. Will they be applied before taxes or after taxes? So I won't wait for an answer. I've thought about this a lot, and I'm wondering why we fool around with this new plan with a federal poverty level. Let's have everybody pay into the system. I mean, if you don't making any money, well, you're not going to pay anything, right? And you make a little money, well, you'll pay a little bit. The other thing I noted was you had $70,000 for income on Social Security. It tops out at $54,000, $54,600 a year. On the household size, I think it runs against our principle, because basically you're saying if you use more health care, then you should pay more, right? Bigger family. That's exactly how insurance companies look at it. Oh, well, you got a bigger family, you'll use it more, so you should pay more. So I really think it goes against the principles that this endeavor is based on. One more thing, I really think that maybe we should consider one tax for everybody, whatever that tax is, to bring the resources in that we need for this. Just one tax for everybody. Everybody pays the same based on their income. Before or after taxes, I don't know. Thank you.
Thank you. And our third person has left the meeting, so that is all the public comment we have right now.
Thanks, Isabel. Is the question that Lou asked, could that be answered? Because I don't know the question. I don't know the answer myself.
The
On the-
question about the maxing out of the
No,
social.
Yeah, that was
about
for
the
two.
Pre-tax versus after, or yeah, rates before or after taxes was the question.
Charlie has his hand raised. We'll let him say it.
Yeah,
I mean, so right now, the amount of revenue raised that we are estimating, and therefore the tax rates are assuming that we are basing it on federally reported AGI minus Social Security income, because I mean, the minus Social Security income is because by the Oregon Constitution, it can't be taxed. And the federal AGI would mean it is, we aren't taking into account any Oregon additions or subtractions. That's what it's, that's how we figure out, is the tax rate high enough to raise the amount of revenue we need. Regarding another comment about, why do we have essentially two taxes now? We have a employer payroll tax and a personal income tax. The reasoning for having an employer payroll tax is because of the federal tax expenditure for employer-sponsored health insurance. Right now, if employer pays for health insurance for their employees, it is not federally taxed. It's not part of income tax. It's not part of FICA, and so it is a federal exemption that is worth about $4.5 billion in Oregon. It's probably more now, but that was, I think, in 23 or 24. And if you would say, okay, we're not going to tax employers, we're just going to tax the income that people make, then that $4.5 billion would be paid by taxpayers from Oregon, but none of it would be used for healthcare in Oregon. It would all just be new money going to the federal government. And so in order to not have that happen, we're proposing an employer payroll tax, because when the employers pay it, it isn't federally taxed, because they only pay on the money they actually make. And they're not making that money. So that's the reasoning for it to be there. And then the rest of it is all just taxes. It's just a healthcare personal income tax. And the reasoning for that is because it is not just employers' wages that we want to have taxed. We want all income to be taxed. So, and again, so that's the essence of it, of why there are two taxes. So.
Richard, did you want to
And
add?
yeah, this Social Security was based on a household of two. That's why it went above the 55,000.
Yeah.
Or
Oh yeah, that was the other thing. Yeah.
Social Security max. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you both. Okay, so we're at the time that we would like to vote on these four considerations. Does anyone have a strong opinion about whether to vote on them separately or together? Well, we could try to vote on them together. And maybe we'll see if anyone has a problem with the particular recommendations. So here's what I got, and of course Morgan just outlined them very well. But the four things that we're voting for as recommendations or responses to the board are that we're looking at an employer tax credit that is less than 100%, but we don't have the specific percentage yet. We're still looking at a variety of factors. The second one is we're going to use the term household readjustment instead of a PPP, like we're getting rid of the PPP term. Third is that we've agreed that we want to use 100% as a Medicare credit. And then fourth, we're still considering the soft cap. So it's still on the table, but there are some committee members who would like to get rid of the soft cap. So we're still discussing. That's what I've got. Does that sound about right? Okay. So could I have a motion to approve those 4 recommendations, responses, Charlie?
I mean, actually, I have a question. So,
Okay.
are we gonna, well, I guess maybe Richard and I gonna work with Will and Terry and maybe some others to change some of the wording and some of the descriptions in the memo? Is that part of this?
Yeah, so that's one of the things I want. I think Mimi, one of the things I want to talk to you about is I think we can make a revision to the memo here that maybe is, I think, as I think Mary Lou said, a little more substantive to the policy questions that the board has the right elevation to weigh back in on. So we can probably leave out much of the analysis, but we need to speak clearly with respect to the policy and the intent and the direction of some of these things. If that sounds right, Mary Lou. But but yes, I mean, your answer, Charlie, yes, we're going to want to revise that and get it in front of you in terms of the specifics.
And I think we can put in more tables that will be helpful.
Yeah. We can put many of those in the appendix.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that revised memo would go to the board as soon as possible. I mean, it's something that they would consider at the next meeting, right?
Yeah, and part of the reason is we have to do that quickly because they need those
Right.
materials ASAP, Charlie, just FYI. So part of the reason here is not avoiding the additional analysis and just work on the language.
Yeah,
What's the timeline?
The board has received its meeting
Tomorrow.
materials already. Yeah, it's tomorrow.
When does the board need it? They need it tomorrow?
Yeah, probably today, but they've been gracious to give us till tomorrow.
Okay.
Jeff?
Would you please include us on the committee with a copy of that memo when it goes to the board? And then secondly, these are pretty bland recommendations. It's not really saying anything specific with respect to the soft cap. You know,
Well, maybe it's not recommendations, maybe it's more, these are agreed upon responses to those particular questions. I mean, we can frame it a different way if you like.
well, in any way you frame it, these are all, saying, oh gosh, here's where we are. We're still thinking about a lot of things and we don't have any recommendations yet. And my response to that, if I was on the governing board, which is, okay, I like apple pie too.
Okay, so do you not want to vote on this then? I mean, I'm just trying to figure out how
I
we.
mean, I'm going to vote
decide-
yes because they're so
decide whether
bland.
We agree with these 4
Yeah.
considerations.
As I said, I'm voting yes, but these are very bland recommendations.
Mhm. Charlie?
We have one particular recommendation. That's 100% Medicare
Yeah.
credit.
Hey,
So
That's very
one
specific,
particular one.
yeah.
Other
Well,
ones
and
are
to
so bland.
not use the term PPP.
Yeah.
yeah.
Yes, yeah.
All right, so could I have a motion to approve these 4 recommendations / responses?
So moved.
Could we have a second? Charlie?
Second.
Okay, any other discussion? Okay, so if you're in favor, you can raise your emoji hand, or you could say aye. Probably raise your emoji hand is better since we're all virtual. Okay.
So just for the state of the record, because I don't know if the recording gets all the hands.
Oh, right. Okay.
I see Jeff Goodman, Mary Henrich, Cheryl Ramirez, Richard Gibson, Bethany Stairs, John Santa, all of their hands up. I think Charlie Swanson, and Jeff Goodman. I don't see a response from you.
I lowered my hand after I said
thank you.
yes.
Okay, got it. There we go. So looks like everybody here is in favor.
Okay, all right. Thanks. I'm sorry about that, Isabel. I guess we could have done a roll call vote. So next time. Next time when we have some more specific, stronger recommendations, we'll do a roll call vote. Okay, thank you.
John?
Yeah, John. Oh,
No.
just okay. Anything else for the good of the order today?
I have one item.
Yes.
Thank you. The material we're getting from Eco Northwest and Milliman, At our last meeting, Milliman said, you can't have it, that they had all the PowerPoints. It's proprietary. I disagree with that. And I think if it's presented, oh, good. Mimi's going to say, Jeff, you're mistaken. We do have it.
Yes and yes. Yes, they do have oversight over it, but anything that is presented here, sometimes they make tiny little changes and ask us to send out the one that they have made their correct copy. But so that's why oftentimes the Milliman presentations come to you on the day of, because they're not completed up until then. They have an internal process that they go through. But yes, they absolutely are the property of everyone, the public, the people of Oregon.
And let's get them up on our website.
They absolutely go up on the
Yes.
website
Okay.
as soon
Good
as we get them from them. Sometimes there's like a 24, 48-hour turnaround time sometimes.
Thank you. I checked within the 24-hour period, so my apologies for being too quick to check.
Thanks, Jeff. John?
Yeah, I just want to check, because this is a sore point for me. The task force failed in their contract with Optimus to require that Optimus give the people of Oregon the model that they used. My impression was that did not occur with Milliman, and that the contract requires them to give the model to the people of Oregon, so that the next actuary doesn't have to begin from zero and build the model, or has to figure out the model. So I hope we're not just talking about presentations from Milliman, but the model. I mean, there's basically a body of code and spreadsheets, as like we've seen Charlie generate, that is the model. They're the actuarial model. Are folks following me?
Yes, no, I completely follow you, John. Thank you. There's some specific things in the contract, some models that Milliman has already created and used and are their property, and that they use that for our modeling may not be available. Anything they generate for this will be available. So there's specific language in the contract.
Thanks, Jamie. Okay, with that, we are adjourned. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Have a great
Bye.
Thanksgiving,
Thanks,
everyone.
Thank you.
Thank
Yeah, you
you.
too. Bye-bye.